You're listening to the Naked Bible Podcast. To support this podcast, go to nakedbiblepodcast.com and click on the support link in the upper right-hand corner. If you're new to the podcast and Dr. Heiser's approach to the Bible, click on New Start Here at nakedbiblepodcast.com.
Welcome to the Naked Bible Podcast, episode 380, or 46th Q&A. I'm the layman, Trey Strickland, and he's the scholar, Dr. Michael Heiser. Hey, Mike, what's going on?
Well, we're going to have a Q&A here, Trey, and I guess there might be something going on. We're not quite sure yet, but why don't we get into it? Since this is a Q&A, this is a good place to bring up a couple of questions that we've been getting asked and sort of a status update. So why don't you let everybody know what we're talking about here?
All right. Yeah, sure. We got two things, Mike, that we're trying to do. The first thing is we are going to try to have a conference this year, and we're shooting for October 30th, which actually is the exact date for our 400th episode for the podcast. So we're going to try to do a little 400th episode celebration
something,
/ Naked Bible conference at the same time. So we don't have the details for that quite yet, but we just wanted to at least give you all a heads up so you can at least think about. It's going to be in Dallas again at the same place, all day Saturday. And Friday, we'll probably try to do a podcast episode, maybe a live Q&A meetup or some celebration type thing, but we don't have any details yet planned out for that, but we will here in the coming weeks flush that out.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to give you a heads up for the conference of this year, and October 30th is what we're shooting for in Dallas. So you can start to mentally make your plans for that. Yeah.
And we figure, we can do something this year, and, as things get clearer, we'll of course let you all know.
Yeah, absolutely. What better way to celebrate our 400th episode than at our conference? That's one thing, Mike. And the next thing is in 2022. So we're a solid year and a half away from, but in October, probably the second week of October, we're trying to shoot for the cruise again. So the Naked Bible Cruise in mid-October of 2022. And Mike, it's the same topics, right?
Yeah.
Of the kind of unseen realm
same kind
material.
of. Yeah, that's going to be the orientation. What we're going to be dispensing as far as content, destination, same as the old cruise. The one that never came off. So we're just take another shot at it. October 2022.
All right, there you go. Those are two pretty big things, Mike. 400th celebration / conference and a cruise. So we'd love to see everybody, and
yeah, it'll be fun. These things are always fun once they come together. So those are probably, I don't know if those are the two issues that'll draw the most attention in the Q&A. Probably not. We have some good questions today, so why don't we just jump into them?
Sounds good. Our first one is from Briar. Briar asks about the ancient Assyrians, where at times in their history somewhat monotheistic. They worshipped a god named Ashur, who in the oldest myths has no genealogy, unlike the gods of Mesopotamia or Canaan. Are there any connections that can be made with the Yahweh of Israel and Ashur of the Assyrians? Also, just out of curiosity, since they share similar symbolism, i.e. the bearded figure mounted on a pair of wings, can connections also be made between Ashur and Ahura Mazda of Zoroastrian religion, and thus between Ahura Mazda and Yahweh? I'm curious to know if other ancient cultures might have worshipped the one true God like Israel did.
Well, the Bible certainly presents the human story this way, that originally humanity as a collective had a knowledge of the one true God and so on and so forth. This gets altered, at Babel, post-Babel, and whatnot. So we on one hand, we shouldn't be surprised if there's sort of vestigial ideas that would extend from an original monotheism, onward. By the way, if you're interested in this topic, there's a There's actually a book on it by Winifred Corduan, Corduan. He's a philosopher of religion, and I believe evangelical orientation. But he has a book on this. And just in case you're interested, again, from a philosophical sort of historical perspective. Again, he's not a biblical scholar, but it's still kind of a major work on this idea, at least probing it. Now, having said all that, the specifics of the question I'm pretty skeptical of, with Ashur and the Assyrians and Ahura Mazda and so on and so forth. The reason is a lot of the talk about the Assyrians in this regard, and I know the question was worded, I think, appropriately, somewhat monotheistic. I think that certainly is the best way you could describe the situation. But a lot of this talk stems from the work of Simo Parpola, who was a cuneiform specialist, a scholar of Assyriology. I don't know that he's still alive. He probably is. But he published a few things that sort of promoted this idea. Specifically, 2 books. I'm just going to give the titles here so that if you're interested in this, you could reference them or look them up. One is called The Assyrian Tree of Life, Tracing the Origins of Jewish Monotheism and Greek Philosophy. Again, this is, sort of it's kind of a major work. Assyrian Prophecies, 1997, is a little later, and that's sort of a full expression. The first one is a journal article, and the second one, 4 years later, is a book called Assyrian Prophecies. Now, again, this is where a lot of this discussion derives from and really revolves around. Now, the problem is Parpola's work in this regard has not been, I can't even say it hasn't been widely accepted. It hasn't been basically accepted by most anybody. So it's very idiosyncratic. And there have been lengthy reviews of this that really calls the methodology and the conclusions into question. I'm going to mention 2 of these, and these are going to be in the protected folder for people who subscribe to my newsletter. The first one is by Gerald Cooper. It's Cooper. Cooper was for many years an Assyriologist, and he taught Akkadian and Sumerian at Johns Hopkins University. He reviews the book Assyrian Prophecies, the Assyrian Tree, and Mesopotamian Origins of Jewish. Well, let me just give you his title of his review, and it kind of tells you where he's going. Assyrian Prophecies, the Assyrian Tree, the Mesopotamian Origins of Jewish Monotheism, Greek Philosophy, Christian Theology, Gnosticism, and much more. So there's a little tinge of sarcasm there, but basically this is a 16-page book review, which is kind of unusual. It's pretty long, but he goes through Parpola's ideas pretty systematically and basically says, I'm not buying it. So his abstract concludes this way: this review article, while concurring with that some roots of these phenomena may indeed be found in ancient Mesopotamia, disagrees strongly with the author's methodology and conclusions. So again, he's not buying what Parpola is selling. The other article that I'm going to put in the protected folder is by John Hilber. Now, Hilber has been a guest on this podcast before. Most recently we talked about his book, Divine Accommodation and Metaphor. Now, John, since Parpola is writing, the title of his book, Assyrian Prophecies, John is somebody, for his dissertation and basically his ongoing research, has spent a lot of time in this material, Neo-Assyrian prophetic prophecy stuff. Okay, prophecy, again, not like what we think of an end times prophecy, but prophecy is like the role of prophets. Okay, and he did a paper in 2010 at ETS, and I have the paper, and again, this is what's going to be uploaded. So I have some notes scribbled in this paper. I just I scanned it so that I could upload it and you could have it. I don't know if you can read my writing or not, but what the important part of the content is actually John's paper, and it's titled "Monotheism in Neo-Assyrian Religion?" An appraisal. So this is a 9-page, again, survey of what Parpola is arguing for. And again, John is also not persuaded. And the same kinds of problems. They're just sort of, guesses. There are some methodological issues. Sometimes you need to define this or that term in a specific way. Parpola does for his idea to work. Again, there are just some problems. There's some significant problems with what Parpola is trying to argue. So because I'm aware that this idea is at best tenuous, I don't want to say that we can draw any connections between Yahweh and Ashur of the Assyrians. Specifically, I'm going with the trajectory of the question here, specifically in regard to monotheism, or the status of Yahweh and Ashur within their respective theological systems, because I just don't think we're on secure ground to do that. Now, when it comes to Ahura Mazda and Yahweh, Zoroastrianism, that as well, it is far from certain that Zoroastrianism was monotheistic. This is actually a big fight within the rather small community that specializes in Zoroastrianism, Persian religion. One of these people is Ed Yamauchi. Yamauchi is now retired. He taught at the University of Miami in Ohio in the history department. He's a specialist in ancient Persia. And he has a really nice book, Persia and the Bible. It was published by Baker back in 1996. And so I think, this is a good place to go. I'm going to read a few things about the issues with Ahura Mazda and this whole monotheism thing. So Yamauchi writes this. He says, associated with Ahura Mazda were 6 Amesha Spentas, or bounteous immortals, who are conceived as semi-personal manifestations of the supreme God. The 6 are Asha, which means righteousness, Vohumana, good mind, Kshathra, power, Armighty, suitable disposition, Harvatat, health, and Amaritat, immortality. Yamauchi says these appear to be personified abstractions, but they were more than abstractions because they were venerated by Zoroaster. So let's just stop there with that first paragraph. So you certainly don't have anything like this in biblical thought, where other, we'll just call them members of the heavenly host, other divine beings, are going to be venerated or worshipped or something like this. You do have a Trinitarian system. Maybe you have a double Trinitarian, but the way Zoroastrian material talks about these 6 is not the way the Bible would be thinking about a Godhead, like co-equal, co-eternal. None of that is on the board here. This sounds actually more like Sethian Gnosticism, Gnostic cosmology, with the aeons, the coming from the true God, and when they are collectivized, they are the pleroma, the fullness of the true God, and all that. It sounds more like that than it does, real Trinitarianism or Godhead thinking in the Bible. Back to Yamauchi, he says the concept of the immortals is one of the most important and original doctrines of Zoroaster. They are prominent in the Gathas, which state explicitly, the Gathas, by the way, are written text for Zoroastrianism. They are prominent in the Gathas, which state explicitly that Ahura Mazda created the first 4 immortals. So these immortals have a beginning. Okay, that's quite different than Godhead thinking. But again, back to Yamauchi. Each of the immortals is associated with some aspect of creation. Vohumana with animals, Asha with fire, Kshathra with metals, Armighty with earth, Harvatat with water, and Amaritat with plants. In later times, the Amesha Spentas, again these 6 bounteous immortals, were transformed into male and female deities. Armighty became the spouse of Ahura Mazda. The Parsis, the Persians, now regard the immortals as archangels. So their doctrine has evolved a bit. Many leading scholars believe Zoroaster taught not a monotheism, but a dualism with 2 primordial uncreated spirits, a good spirit that is God and an evil spirit. Now, again, if that's the case, and again, there's even